Welcome to HFY Stories. If you're ready for jaw-dropping stories and a universe full of excitement, hit that subscribe button like it's the big red button in a space opera. Give us a like if you're feeling that interstellar vibe and comment below to join the conversation. The Gathering Storm. The Galactic Council's grand chambers echoed with laughter, the kind that wasn't just amused but condescending. Representatives from various species, towering Andorans, sleek and serpentine Zimari, and the ever-arrogant Torvani, gathered around the central holographic display, where a miniature projection of the Terran fleet floated. It was a mere speck compared to the massive armadas they each commanded. "What a joke," sneered Commander Jurex of the Torvani. "Humans dare to call this toy flotilla a fleet." Ambassador Orin of the Zimari added with a slithered chuckle, "Do they not realize the scale of this conflict? A single one of our battleships could swallow their entire force." Yet amidst the mockery, one figure remained silent. The human representative, Commander Sarah Valen, stood with her arms crossed, her expression unyielding. She was a stark contrast to the flamboyant presence of the others, her demeanor calm, almost serene. "They may be small in number," Valen finally spoke, her voice cutting through the laughter. "But underestimating humans has historically been a fatal mistake." The laughter faded, replaced by uneasy silence. Still, the arrogance in the room was palpable. No one truly believed that humanity's tiny fleet posed any threat. The Galactic Council had convened to address the growing threat of the Kelri Dominion, a ruthless empire known for its insatiable hunger for conquest. The Kelri had begun encroaching on the Outer Rim territories, worlds that were home to numerous species, including humanity. The Council, composed of the galaxy's most powerful races, had agreed to a coalition to counter the Kelri invasion. But when it came time for each species to declare their contributions, the Terran fleet's modest numbers had become a point of ridicule. The humans had sent only 20 ships, mere frigates and destroyers, while the other races boasted fleets of hundreds, if not thousands, of capital ships. Commander Valen's confidence, however, was unshaken. "We're not here to flaunt numbers," she said, her eyes steely, "but to win. And we will." The Council eventually moved past the human fleet, dismissing it as inconsequential. The real discussions focused on strategy and deployment, with each species jockeying for the most prestigious positions in the impending battle. After the meeting, Valen returned to the Terran flagship, Resolute. It was an older ship, not particularly impressive by galactic standards, but it was sturdy, reliable, a symbol of humanity's resilience. Her crew greeted her with quiet nods, their faces mirroring her own determination. They were the best humanity had to offer, not just in skill, but in spirit. As the fleet prepared for war, Valen gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. Captain Marcus Hale, her second in command, was a broad-shouldered man with a reputation for unflinching bravery. Lieutenant Commander Ilara Morse, the fleet's tactical genius, stood beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the battle plans. "They're all laughing at us," Hale remarked, his voice laced with irritation. "They think we're nothing." "Let them," Valen replied, a faint smile playing on her lips. "We've been underestimated before." Morse leaned forward, her fingers dancing over the controls to bring up a holographic map. "The Kelri are deploying in sectors 9 and 12. They're focusing their forces there, expecting a head-on assault. But if we approach from Sector 6, we can catch them off guard." "We'll be outnumbered," Hale pointed out. "Even if we surprise them, it'll be a bloodbath." Valen nodded, her expression turning grim. "We don't need to win the entire war in one battle. We just need to make them hurt enough to question their strategy. The others will follow once they see the Kelri can bleed." Morse smiled at that. "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that might just make that happen." The plan was set, but as the officers dispersed, Valen lingered in the briefing room. She gazed at the holographic map, her thoughts drifting to the home she was fighting to protect, a small green planet on the edge of the galaxy where her family waited for her return. She couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not ever. And deep down, she knew that this was humanity's moment. They might be small, but they were fierce, and they were about to show the galaxy just how dangerous a cornered human could be. The first strike. The Kelry Dominion's fleet loomed large in the black void of space, an ominous presence that stretched across the horizon. Massive dreadnoughts, bristling with weaponry, patrolled the edges of their formation, while swarms of fighters darted between them like angry hornets. It was a terrifying sight, one designed to intimidate and crush any opposition. But from the shadows of Sector 6, the Terran fleet emerged, silent and deliberate. Valen stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Kellery had yet to detect them, their attention focused on the sectors they believed to be the main battlegrounds. "Hold position," Valen ordered, her voice steady. "We wait for the signal." The plan was simple, but risky. The other coalition fleets were engaging the Kellery head-on, drawing their fire and attention. The Terran fleet, however, would strike from an unexpected angle, targeting the Kellery's vulnerable supply lines and command ships. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching Valen's nerves to the breaking point. The tension on the bridge was palpable, the crew's eyes glued to their stations, waiting for the order to attack. Then the signal came, a brief, coded transmission from the Coalition's main fleet. "Engage. Launch all fighters," Valen commanded, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Target their supply ships first. We cripple them, then we hit their command ships." The Resolute shuddered as its hangar bays opened, releasing a wave of sleek, black fighters into the void. They streaked toward the Kellery fleet, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. The first explosions lit up the sky as the Terran fighters tore through the Kellery supply ships with surgical precision. The enemy was caught off guard, their defenses slow to respond. Valen could see the confusion on the tactical display as the Kellery scrambled to regroup. "Commander, they're redirecting forces to Sector 6, Morse reported, her fingers flying over the controls. "But they're still spread thin. We've got a window." "Push forward," Valen ordered. "Let's show them what a tiny fleet can do." The Terran ships surged ahead, their weapons blazing. They moved with a coordinated precision that belied their small numbers, exploiting every weakness in the Kellery's formation. The enemy ships, massive and powerful, struggled to keep up, their size and firepower useless against the speed and agility of the Terran fleet. On the bridge of the Resolute, Valen watched as the Kellery command ship loomed into view. It was a behemoth, dwarfing her own ship, but she felt no fear. This was the target. This was where they would make their stand. "Focus all fire on that command ship," she ordered. "We take it down, and the rest will follow." The Resolute's cannons roared to life, sending a barrage of energy beams toward the Kellery command ship. The other Terran ships followed suit, their combined firepower hammering the enemy vessel's shields. For a moment, it seemed like the Kellery ship would withstand the assault. Its shields flared, holding strong against the onslaught. But then, with a brilliant flash of light, they collapsed, and the Terran fleet's weapons began tearing into the ship's hull. "Shields down," Morse reported, a triumphant edge to her voice. "They're vulnerable. Hit them with everything we've got," Valen ordered, her heart pounding in her chest. The Resolute's cannons fired again, this time punching through the Kellery ship's armor. Explosions rippled across its surface, and for a brief moment, the massive vessel seemed to waver, as if it might hold on. But then, with a final, earth-shattering explosion, the Kellery command ship detonated, its remains scattering across the battlefield like burning embers. The cheers that erupted on the Resolute's bridge were deafening. Valen allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. They had done it. Against all odds, they had taken down the Kellery's most powerful ship. But the battle was far from over. The Kellery fleet, though shaken, was still vast and powerful. And now, they were turning their full attention to the Terran fleet. "Commander, we've got incoming," Hale warned, his voice tense. They're not happy. Valen's smile faded. The real fight was just beginning. Form up, she ordered. Let's give them something to remember us by. The tides of war. The battlefield had become a chaotic swirl of light and shadow as the Kelry fleet descended upon the Terran ships with a fury that shook the stars. Valen's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the tactical display, the tiny blips of her fleet surrounded by a sea of red. The Kelry were out for blood, and the Terran fleet was caught in the eye of the storm. Evasive maneuvers. Valen barked. Keep moving. Don't let them box us in. The Resolute lurched as it dodged a barrage of enemy fire, its shields flickering under the strain. All around them, the smaller Terran ships weaved through the Kelry's ranks, their superior maneuverability allowing them to dodge the worst of the onslaught. But it was clear that they were outmatched. The Kelry ships were too numerous, their firepower overwhelming. On the bridge, the crew worked frantically, their faces etched with determination. Morse was a blur of motion at the tactical console, calling out enemy positions and directing the fleet's movements with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. Captain Hale, get us closer to the frigates, Valen ordered. We need to regroup, or we'll be torn apart. Hale nodded, his jaw clenched as he steered the Resolute toward the remnants of their fleet. The Terran ships were holding their own, but the odds were stacked against them. Every few seconds, another ship would wink out of existence on the tactical display, a harsh reminder of the cost of this battle. Commander, we've lost the Valiant, Morse reported, her voice tight with emotion. And the Intrepid is taking heavy fire. Valen's grip tightened on the railing. They were losing too many ships, too fast. The Kelry were relentless, their sheer numbers threatening to overwhelm them. But then, something shifted. A new energy seemed to surge through the Terran fleet, a determination that burned brighter than the stars around them. They had come too far to be defeated now. They had faced insurmountable odds before, and they had always emerged victorious. Focus fire on their lead ships, Valen commanded. We need to break their formation. The Resolute's cannons roared to life once more, joined by the remaining Terran ships. They targeted the Kelry's vanguard, hammering their lead ships with everything they had. The Kelry, caught off guard by the sudden ferocity of the attack, began to falter. Commander, they're pulling back, Morse called out, her voice filled with hope. Valen watched as the Kelry ships began to retreat, their formation breaking apart under the relentless assault. The tide was turning, but Valen knew better than to celebrate too soon. Don't let up, she ordered. Push them back. Make them regret ever underestimating us. The Terran fleet surged forward, pressing the attack. They chased the Kelry ships through the battlefield, picking them off one by one. The Kelry, so confident in their superiority, were now on the defensive, their once imposing fleet reduced to a disorganized rabble. But even as the Terran ships fought with renewed vigor, the cost of the battle weighed heavily on Valen's mind. They had lost too many good people, too many ships, and the fight was far from over. Commander, we're detecting a massive energy surge, Morse reported, her voice edged with alarm. It's coming from their rear lines. Valen's heart sank as she realized what was happening. The Kelry were preparing a final desperate gambit, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the battle in their favor. They're charging their superweapon, Valen said, her voice grim. If they fire that, we're finished. The Kelry's superweapon was a massive planet-killer cannon, capable of obliterating entire fleets in a single blast. It was their ace in the hole, a weapon of last resort that they had been saving for the right moment. And now, it seemed, that moment had arrived. We need to stop them, Valen said, her mind racing. Morse, can we target their power core? Morse shook her head. Their shields are too strong. We'd never get through in time. Valen's mind raced as she searched for a solution. They were out of time, out of options. The Kelry's superweapon was about to fire, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Unless... Captain Hale, Valen said, her voice steady. Prepare to execute Emergency Protocol Delta. We're going in. Hale's eyes widened in shock. Commander, you can't be serious. That's a suicide mission. Valen met his gaze, her expression resolute. It's the only way. We take out their power core, or we all die. There's no other choice. Hale hesitated for a moment, then nodded, his expression hardening with determination. Aye, Commander. We'll see it done. The Resolute veered sharply, breaking away from the main fleet and heading straight for the Kelry's superweapon. The crew braced themselves for the final, desperate run, their faces set with grim determination. Target their power core, Valen ordered. All weapons, fire on my mark. The Resolute closed the distance, its cannons blazing as it pounded the Kelry's shields. The enemy ship responded with a barrage of fire, but the Resolute held steady, pushing forward through the storm of enemy fire. Shields at 20%. Morse called out, her voice strained. Hold steady, Valen said, her eyes locked on the target. We're almost there. The Resolute shuddered as another volley of enemy fire slammed into its hull. The ship's systems were failing, alarms blaring as the shields buckled under the strain. Shields at 10%. Steady. The Resolute broke through the Kelry's shields, its cannons unleashing a final devastating barrage on the enemy ship's power core. Now, Valen shouted. The Resolute's cannons fired one last time, a concentrated blast that punched through the enemy ship's armor and struck the power core. For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the Kelry's superweapon detonated, the explosion consuming the enemy ship and sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The Resolute was caught in the blast, its hull torn apart by the force of the explosion. The bridge erupted in flames, the crew thrown from their stations as the ship began to break apart. But Valen felt no fear, only a deep, profound sense of peace. They had done it. They had stopped the Kelry, saved the fleet. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy the true strength of humanity. As the darkness closed in, Valen allowed herself a final, satisfied smile. The Kelry had laughed at their tiny fleet. They weren't laughing now. The price of victory. The debris field that had once been the Kelry fleet drifted silently through the void, the remnants of the battle scattered across the stars. The Terran fleet, battered and bloodied, had emerged victorious, but the cost of that victory was written in the wreckage that floated around them. Aboard the Coalition flagship, Unity, the surviving leaders of the Galactic Council gathered once more. The mood in the Grand Chamber was somber, a stark contrast to the laughter that had filled the room before the battle. The representatives of the Andorans, the Zimari, and the Torvani were all present, their expressions grim as they reviewed the aftermath of the conflict. But the center of attention was Commander Sarah Valen, who stood before them, her uniform scorched and torn, a bandage wrapped around her head. She had been pulled from the wreckage of the Resolute, barely alive, her survival nothing short of a miracle. Commander Valen. Ambassador Orin of the Zimari began, his voice hesitant. On behalf of the Galactic Council, we owe you a great debt. Your actions saved us all. Valen nodded, her expression unreadable. She had heard the words before, the empty gratitude of those who had watched from the sidelines while her people fought and died. But there was no satisfaction in their praise, only a deep, gnawing sense of loss. We may have won the battle, Valen replied, her voice steady. But the war is far from over. The Kelry Dominion is crippled, but they are not defeated. They will return, and when they do, we must be ready. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over them. The leaders of the Galactic Council exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier arrogance replaced by a newfound respect for the woman who had led them to victory. We underestimated you, Commander Jurex of the Torvani admitted, his tone begrudging. Your fleet, your people, we thought you were insignificant. We were wrong. Valen met his gaze, her expression hard. Underestimation is a mistake the galaxy has made before. And it's a mistake that humanity has always paid for in blood. The chamber fell silent again, the truth of her words hanging heavy in the air. The Terran fleet had been small, but it had proven to be a force to be reckoned with. They had shown the galaxy that numbers and size were not the only measures of strength. But we cannot afford to dwell on the past. Valen continued, her voice firm. We must look to the future. The Kelri will return, and when they do, we must be united. The Galactic Council must stand together, or we will all fall. The leaders nodded in agreement, their resolve hardened by the ordeal they had just endured. The battle had been a harsh lesson, but it was one they had taken to heart. The Terran fleet has proven its worth. Ambassador Orin said, his tone respectful. Your people will have a seat at the table, Commander Valen. You have earned it. Valen inclined her head in acknowledgement, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The price of victory had been steep, and the scars of the battle would linger long after the last Kelri ship had been destroyed. As the meeting adjourned, Valen stepped out onto the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. The wreckage of the Resolute had been recovered, the remains of her crew given the honors they deserved, but there was no joy in her heart, only a deep, abiding sorrow. The Terran fleet had won the day, but at what cost? The lives lost, the ships destroyed, the future that had been forever altered by the choices she had made. It weighed heavily on her soul. But she knew there was no time for mourning. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and the Terran fleet would be needed again. They would rebuild, stronger and more determined than ever. And when the Kelri returned, they would be ready. As she stared out at the stars, Valen allowed herself a moment of reflection. The galaxy had laughed at their tiny fleet, dismissed humanity as insignificant. But now, they knew the truth. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They were survivors, fighters, and they would not go quietly into the night. The lesson had been learned in blood, and the galaxy would never forget it. But for now, there was peace, a fragile, hard-won peace that had been bought with the lives of those who had given everything to defend it. And as Valen stood there, watching the stars twinkle in the void, she made a silent vow. They would rebuild. They would be ready. And when the time came, the galaxy would remember the name of the Terran fleet, because they had laughed at them once. They wouldn't laugh again.